So it's been 7 days since we embarked on the adventure of building the 79. And what a 7 days it's been, to be honest. Monster efforts from everyone that's been involved. There was some highs and there was definitely some lows. There was some late nights and some extremely cold mornings. There was 3 full days, 14 hours a day, with a mix of absolute legends that helped us out. And I'm gonna run you through the trials and tribulations that was the build, and let you know the dramas we had and the adventures we had along the way.
I'm Tank. I own a 79 Cruiser and I've just said yes to a trip that I know this thing can't do in its current state. Buckle in as I pull as many strings as I can to give this bucket of bolts the biggest makeover it's ever had, all in 4 short weeks. This is Off the Coffs.
All right, so job 1 on the Cruiser is actually the suspension. As you would have seen earlier, the suspension on the car is pretty sagged at the moment. It's quite old, hasn't had any love, but the legends at Tough Dog have actually hooked us up pretty much with the catalog for a 79. And we're gonna go through the process of installing it all, talk about some of the gear that we've got. And yeah, I'm really excited because I actually haven't run Tough Dog gear before in the past. I'm keen to get out on the tracks, test it, see how it goes. The team at Tough Dog are actually on the trip with us too, which is great. So if we've got any little tech issues or we want to make some adjustments or anything like that, they can definitely help us out throughout the trip. But yeah, the key is get the car sitting nice and make it feel nice and tight back on the road again, because at the moment she's pretty loose. We'll just run through some of the gear that Tough Dog has supplied here. I'm not going to talk about what everything does. We'll touch on those things as we're putting it in the car. But first up, we've got our panhard rod, adjustable steering dampener, caster correction bushes, so when we've done the lift, it corrects. We've obviously got the shocks, so I'm very excited about that because the shocks at the moment are no good. Front coil springs, sway bar links, all the shackles in here as well for the leaf springs, which are down on the floor. And yeah, basically, we're going to get stuck into it now because we've got a very short timeline to get everything done on the car. But we'll take you through the process as we get on the car and talk about a few of the features as we add it all in. So we got it up on the hoist, and realistically, the Tough Dog product was a very easy install, and we're actually very, very happy with it. Mostly everything just bolted straight up to the car. It's obviously a product they've designed and worked with 79 series for a long time, so it is a very simple install. It's not difficult. But we had a couple of problems or more issues based on the way I've built the car and also the weight of the car. So the first problem we had is we put a very heavy leaf pack in the back of this car. We'd bolted in the rear springs, so it was cool. The car had then lifted up because it had sagged so much with the old springs and the old shocks. So it lifted it back up to where we wanted it to be sitting, but when we were trying to bolt the shocks in, we couldn't actually get the bottom shock bolts in, so we had to lower the car back down onto the springs to let the springs compress a little bit to drop those bolts in and tighten them all up, which wasn't a big deal, but it was just one of those little moments where we're like, oh, this isn't working how we planned. But we got there. That was pretty straightforward. That was the only issue we had on the rear of the car. On the front of the car, as I mentioned earlier before we started doing the build, I've actually jumped this vehicle before in the side-by-side versus episodes. And that actually broke a shock mount off the diff, and that had been repaired, and the way that repair was actually done quite well, but there was about a 5mm plate welded to the top of the shock mount, which thickened up where the actual shock bolts through. And obviously it was the first side we started on the car, forgot about those problems I'd caused myself in the past. And the actual bolt that drops through the shock mount wasn't quite long enough, and we had a similar issue where we ended up having to put pressure back down on the suspension to get that bottom shock bolt in. It wasn't a drama, but it was a bit of a head scratcher there for a while. We were like, why aren't these shock bolts long enough? But we nailed it, we got it there, we bolted it all up, we tightened it all up, and that moment when we actually sat the car back down on the ground, I was like, oh, it looks like it's meant to look. All right, so the suspension's in, done, checklist is all ticked off. So next up, we're fitting the tyres and the wheels so we can get them on the car, and we'll take it from there. But I'm pretty happy with the suspension in with very little drama, to be honest. I don't know if anyone's ever mounted beadlocks before, but a good time's one way to put it. There's a bit of a process to it, and there's actually some precision tools you actually need to use. A torque wrench is absolutely critical when you're doing beadlocks on your car. So that was a bit of a process, but we got there. The wheels we've got, the KMCs are absolutely unreal looking wheel. They're an alloy rim. Obviously the car had steelies on it beforehand. So we're hoping for a little bit of a weight saving in putting on the allies as well. After we got all the tires mounted up to the vehicle, but then obviously had to fit the wheels to the car. That was a big moment for myself and the team because the build's something we've talked about for quite a while. And then we had 3 days to get it all done. And it was just one of those big ticks on the board where you're just like, something's ticked off, it looks cool, it's gone to plan, and it all fitted. We lower the car down off the hoist onto the ground, and we're all in awe of our work. And the next thing you know, Macca from Shed Life rocks up, Richard from Design and Built rocks up, and we're just like, hey boys, get into it. Here's the list, this is what we've got to do. And the first thing we got those boys onto is actually servicing the vehicle. That was actually a pretty big job actually. So it was all the fluids in the car. So Penrite really hooked us up. We did engine oils, we did front and rear diff oils, we did transfer case oils, we did the coolant.
Oh, what are you doing? Is it your first day or something, Rico?
I'm a 79 Landcruiser expert.
You guys have done a really good job. There's absolutely no mess on the floor. And look, I only need this little rag to clean it up.
That's very satisfying the way
It did land really nice, didn't it?
So Macca essentially got stuck into the fluids first, and then we also jumped into oil filters, fuel filters, pulled out the air filters as well, gave them a really good clean, washed them out, let them dry, and then we actually re-oiled them again so they catch all that dust and stuff that's coming through the snorkels. All right, so it is now 10 p.m. and I'm very, very happy to say that we got through everything we planned to today. So we've just finished up the service. Massive thanks to Richard and Macca, who, when I say we just finished up the service, these boys worked on that for the last couple of hours, got that done. So Penrite chopped us out there, and that is ticked off. The list is looking great. So suspension sorted, service sorted, wheels and tyres are sorted, which leaves us for tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to hit the 12 volt, and we've basically got 2 days to get it all done. Sounds doable. We've got 4 or 5 people helping out, but it is a big list. So we'll get stuck into it in the morning. We might sit down now around the fire in the shed, pull the swags out, have a beer, and then head to bed. See you in the morning. The next morning we woke up in the shed because a few of us slept out there in swags, and the weather was terrible. It was pissing f***ing rain. So Dan from Aussie Arvos and Nathan from Hackshop Garage arrived that morning to give us a hand. First point of call was Nathan was actually jumping into some of the 12 volt wiring on the vehicle. Macca's first job for the morning was just to finalise the coolant. We actually needed to bleed the system, make sure there was no air in it, and we were just waiting for the tool to get that done. So as I mentioned, Dan and Nathan were there to tackle the 12 volt stuff. We really just needed to figure out where to start. It was such a big job. So once we worked out the plan for the 12 volt, we divvied up the jobs between different people so we could all attack something different and work pretty efficiently. So Nathan got on to pulling out some of the gear that was already in the car. So Nathan pulled out the fridge and pulled out the pantry. That gave Macca access to the rear wall of the car where the 12 volt panel was going. So we had Richard next doing what Richard does best, designing up and TIG welding some alley boxes to mount our switches. One of Nathan's favourite jobs is painting stuff. Nathan's specialty.
Yeah, I'm in charge of all the good stuff. Making it look pretty.
We got him to paint the exhaust to just give it a little bit of a birthday.
Oh yeah, that's the shit.
Some of Richard's CAD work was a little less than accurate. In his defence, he didn't have a long time to figure out that CAD. I gave him about an hour when I dropped the car off at LCS. So I forgive you for that one, Rich.
So the plasma table when we cut yesterday, I crashed the gantry, my bad. And potentially what's happened is this panel is a little bit off. Also the divider you're gonna find out tomorrow is a little bit too short because of the plasma. You'll make it fit.
Top to bottom?
Top to bottom. Like 5 mil. Yeah. You'll make it work.
5 mil?
Yeah, you make it work.
Oh, fuck. I'm glad you told me now. I'm not going to be cursing. I'm like, what the fuck?
Sounds like a great time. Sounds like you need a new engineer team.
Yeah.
Whilst this was all happening, I spent a bit of time under the car, decluttering all the old wiring that was in the car. It was a mess. Is that connected? No. Sick.
Definitely not.
Oh.
I've got tension on it, yeah.
Oh, that's still connected to something your way, is it?
To the loom it is, yeah.
So it got to around lunchtime, and Dan and Nathan had to attack the wiring in the front of the car. What I mean by attack the wiring is remove all the dodgy wiring that had been put in the car prior to the boys getting there.
So basically we're stripping out all the old wiring for the spotties that was in here. It's pretty rough.
It's very rough.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of wiring going on around the battery. So basically just to make it A, more reliable, and B, probably neater.
Yeah.
And save 200 kilos of copper that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, so we've got new wiring kits to put in.
Yeah, so we're stripping all of that out and basically starting again. That's it.
While Stan and Nathan were at the front of the car cleaning up that mess, Richard was over on the 12-volt panel starting to fit off all the accessories. After a laborious task of fitting off the accessories, punching the holes through to run the wiring, we passed the panel into Macca, and Macca fitted the panel into the canopy. A major issue we actually came across was the headlights that were originally in the car. Whilst Dan was working on the front of the car, we started hearing some clicking noises and some cracking noises, and those kind of noises you don't want to hear when you're playing wiring.
Right. The predicament we find ourselves in is that I've taken both the headlights out to basically strip out all the excess wiring, and then had everything tested, had everything working, had the spotties working, put the headlights back in, found one of the low beams stopped working, and then in trying to diagnose that, the other low beam stopped working as well. And now we've found that they've got like a HID conversion kit in them, which basically means it strikes at a high voltage and then dials back pretty much directly after the light comes on. And when it strikes, you can see the electricity coming out from the wires where it's not meant to be. So a couple of the wires have basically split their insulation and are now arcing outside the back of the housing instead of in the housing. So they make a light, just not in a controlled way and not where it's meant to be. So this is a bit of a problem because it's about 10 at night at this point, by the time we've stripped everything back down again, and we have to find some way of either overcoming this or putting different headlights in, because tank probably wants low beams.
Oh, some type of low beams.
Yeah.
I mean, I could run with Parkers and Spotties, but I don't think the general public are going to love that too much. So
It's frowned upon.
it's
frowned upon.
This led to that moment of heartbreak on day 2 at about 11 p.m. when we realised the front lights on the car were destined for the bin. So I was talking to Macca about what are we going to do, and he said, hey, Paulie recently just put new headlights in his 79 and they're the bee's knees. Turns out he got them from Oz Best Deals, and the lights themselves are called Cobras. They're actually not a HID light. The old lights we took out were HIDs. These are actually an LED light. They're a plug and play option, which is what I love to hear when you're modifying a car. So we're like, all right, it's 11:30 at night now. We got to get on the phone, give these guys a call tomorrow morning, and Paulie absolutely hooked us up. So we're gonna go get some dinner, and then we're gonna come back after that. And I reckon we'll probably finish up about 11:30, 12 o'clock. The goal realistically at this point for tonight is have all the accessories on the car from an electrical point of view, all the wiring running into the canopy from under the car, through the back of the canopy, through the front of the canopy. So really after that, the goal is just wiring the panel, which, you know, the TVMS, the BMS, and also the Red Vision screen that's in there, plus the big inverter that's going in. So if we can kind of bring everything into that space, and then we know everything's gonna work, then we'll pull the panel out and work on that out on the back of the race truck here where we've got some space. So my goal is all accessories in, but not wired in, just in and ready to go. So if we get there tonight, I'll be pretty confident by tomorrow we'll get this buttoned up. So probably catch you in the morning, and whatever, man. So day 3. Yep, it was a day. Day 3 was upon us, and what we thought was going to be the last day of the build. Richard and Macca actually had to leave very early that morning. They were up at 6 a.m, packed up and gone. Richard had to get Macca back to the airport, and Macca had to get back up to the sunny coast for his daughter's birthday and spend some time with the family. So after the boys left, it was actually a pretty bare bones crew. We had myself, we had Dan from Aussie Arvos, and we had our legendary production crew who generally spend time behind the cameras, but we had them on the tools as well. The first point of call when I got up was I needed to get onto those headlights. I jumped on the phone and called up the team at Oz Best Deals, and they said, yes, we've got headlights in stock. They were super excited that Paulie had put us onto them, and they were absolutely excited that we're gonna put these headlights in the Kincrome build car. So we're down in Phillip Island, which is quite south in Victoria, And Ausbest deals are actually located in Derrimut, which is on the north side of the city. But luckily for me, Jono, our legendary media producer, lives on the north side of the city. So I got on the phone to Jono and basically gave him a list of shops he needed to go to for parts that we realised we needed to have, and sent him on a wild goose chase around the state, just driving along, picking up parts for the 79 and heading down to Bass. With a little bit of creative ingenuity, we figured out how to get the headlights into the car without having to pull the bull bar off. Look, I'm going to assume the indicator plug's the one on the side of the indicator. It's best you come out here, Daniel. Oh, no, either way, I've only got one thing that can plug in, the rest of it's got Dan written all over it. Is he coming, or is he just like, you, Tank? We could just turn it on and see if we get flying.
Sounds like a terrible idea.
Headlight?
Headlight. Yes. Yep.
There's the indicator. Hey.
That's pretty.
Looks good, huh?
Yeah.
That's good.
It was 2 p.m. and we're on a high. We thought, we are flying here, we are gonna absolutely get this done. The next thing you know, it's 8 p.m. and it became questionable again. We basically wedged down in the canopy for around 6 hours to fit off everything electrical. He was fitting off all the plugs, fitting all the terminals, soldering, crimping, bolting, wiring, testing, checking. We literally fed him in the car without a lie.
Big positive that goes into there, and a negative that runs across here and into there. So I might come out down here and across there. Pretty sweet.
That's it, dude.
Yeah, for in here.
Yeah, and then you can do the disconnects with
And I gotta do the outside of the canopy, which is alright because I get to not be in here anymore.
So we hit that point where Dan's like, hey, I think I'm finished. There's an end in sight. This is actually gonna happen. Dan had fitted everything off and we're ready to actually switch everything on. So it was finally time to fire up the system. Dan and I walked over to the Red Vision screen, pushed the on button, and it asked you to configure the system. We were super excited because we just wanted to turn on some lights, turn on a stereo, turn on a fridge, and actually see how it all fires up. A part of setting up the system is putting in your configuration for what battery you have and the parameters that you want to set. And then the next thing that comes up on the screen is, please ensure your battery is fully charged before the system can configure. It was heartbreaking. All we wanted to do was turn it on and see it fire up, but we had to plug the battery in and charge it full, which took forever. The last job we had to tackle for the night was to fit the internal divider wall into the car. That wall was designed by Richard to stop any of the gear that you put in the other side of the canopy, like your swag, your chairs and that stuff, falling into the back of the fridge, falling on where the battery is, or falling into the space where the pantry is when you pull the pantry out. We thought we'd give Dan a break, so we got Kyle, who's normally behind the camera with Jono and Flick, to give me a hand. I wedged myself into the canopy and then Kyle played the game of take the panel in, take the panel out, it doesn't fit, measure this, mark that, and it honestly took us about 2 hours. At that point, we were pretty much delirious. It was past midnight, it was day 3 of the build, we wanted everything to turn on, we were 99.9% sure everything was right, but we couldn't test it. We proceeded to move forward, we bolted the panel in, and then we had to call it a day. Well, technically we had to call it a morning because it was well after 12 at this point. So the finishing touch was finally done. We put the dividing wall in, Kincrome logo looked brilliant that Richard had cut out on the plasma cutter, and it was actually just time to go home. There wasn't anything more we could do. It was well past 2 a.m, everyone was tired, people had a long way to drive, and it was at that point where I conceded to the fact that Saturday and Sunday is gonna be a thing. So after a really good sleep on Friday night, I got up Saturday morning to finally program the Red Vision system and switch it all on and test it. The weather was horrible outside, so I pulled out the awning. I didn't have the luxury of the Kincrome workshop anymore, so I was in the driveway, and I spent the day just programming and testing everything. Everything worked perfectly. The Red Vision screen powered up, the inverter switched on, all the USB plugs worked, the speaker worked, the fridge worked, everything worked perfectly, and it was such a relief. Sunday morning rolled around, and I thought to myself, I better head down to the Kincrome workshop again and give Jacko a hand. We left the shed trashed, so we put all the tools away, buttoned up a few things on the car, showed off the new system, which I was pretty proud that it was working, and just had a good old chat and reminisced about the last 3 days. So that brings us to now. It's Thursday night, it's 6 p.m, and I'm 1 day out from leaving for the trip. Tomorrow is my last day before I hit the road. I'm just gonna get the wheels and tyres balanced. I'm gonna pack the car, put some food and drinks in there. And then at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning, I'm gonna hit the road up to Coffs to hang out with the crew at 4Drive 24/7 and finally put this rig to the test. Hopefully all the hard work, blood, sweat and beers has all been worth it, because we're gonna hit the tracks, and honestly, hopefully I don't do a lid skid in the first 30 meters of the track, because I'll end up in tears. You guys can check that out and we'll do a bit of a recap on how all this panned out. Also, I bet you're all hanging to see what the full build looks like. You're just gonna have to stay tuned for the next episode. I try to go pretty big, and I also want something super reliable. What I've done is primarily I've gone with Red Arc gear. Again, another Australian-made product in most cases, and super reliable and a wicked network as far as Red Arc have got so many dealerships and distributors around the country, it's pretty easy to get a bit of help. So when you jump in the back of there, I've got the Red Vision screen, which is cool. That controls all your switching, it controls all your lights, gives you your battery in, battery out, how much power you've got until it runs down. I'm sure a lot of people know about the Red Arc system. If you don't, it's worth having a look at. It's very cool.